So as you learned, my passion has been engineering since I was a kid. Even in high school, I knew I wanted to be an engineer, mechanical engineer specifically. It never wavered. I've always loved engineering, and I still love engineering to this day. However, I'm here as a photographer. And so I figured I wanted to accomplish some things. I have some great announcements about some new things that I'm excited about in 2021 with virtual tours and C360 photography. I also realized there's a bunch of members here who haven't seen my presentations. I've done about 5 of them now. So I wanted to try to get in some of the nuts and bolts of what I do that some of you may not have seen before. And I'm going to try to throw in a little philosophy to try to illustrate some of my evolution over time to, just make it even a little bit more crazy. So I have 98 slides to try to get through. And the first 3 slides are going to be, I'm going to try to take about 2 minutes for. So get ready. This is going to be like a roller coaster. We're going to be climbing up slow and then riding fast. All right. So how do I get from engineering to photography? Is it evolution, transition, adaptation? I'm going to introduce it by taking on a concept I wondered about several years ago. Happiness versus joy. So happiness and joy seem to be the same thing, but at the same time, there is a difference about this. And several years ago, I started mulling over what does that mean to be happy versus joy? What's the difference? So to take an example, take your favorite sandwich. To eat your favorite sandwich is happiness, makes you happy. You probably have 20 bites that you can savor, that you enjoy. Now, if you share half of that sandwich, technically you should be half as happy. However, that act of sharing is an act of joy. And so depending on who you share it with and whether you get to experience that sharing, your net happiness and joy could be at a profit. So at once, they both seem to activate the same neural networks, but also they seem to be, in a sense, opposite of each other. And so, in a sense, it has to do with the self and maybe selflessness. And maybe the self is where this pivot point is between happiness and joy. And so I wanted to think about, what are these acts of joy? Like joy is kind of a churchy kind of a thing. You think about that in church. Happiness, money can buy happiness. There's those concepts. So I wondered, is there more acts of joy like sharing? Could it be boiled down to some elemental ideas? And so I came up with 6 over a long time. I would keep trying to move them around and change them and see if I could whittle them down, see if I could dissolve any act of joy that I thought was an act of joy. And I came up with these 6. So sharing is in there. Helping is also one of them. These are kind of the acts where there's a sense of sacrifice, but at the same time, they give you a sense of happiness that comes from giving away. Playing and creating. Sometimes if you're playing a game, you're playing against opponents. You could be losing. There's a time limit you could be losing against, but still there's a sense of fulfillment that comes from it. In a sense, even if you're playing in a sandbox, you're creating and expressing. And technically at the end of playing in sandbox, you haven't really accomplished anything except wasted some time, but clearly there's some enjoyment that comes out of it. Creating and expressing, there's failures. When you're writing the first time you do something, or dancing, or even singing, it may not come out that well. So part of learning and failing and iterating shouldn't necessarily be come from a sense of happiness, but they still give you a sense of joy. So this is how I chose to define it. And I'm going to use this matrix to go through my evolution from engineering to photography, and while it all kind of blends together and kind of helps express the evolution of my change from one passion to another, and maybe in a sense evolves them together. All right, so here we go. Now I got to get 97 slides in the rest of the chapter. All right, creating and learning. Engineering is basically create, fail, learn, iterate, do it over again. You keep failing until you succeed. I love engineering. This is when I was in the design team for the Formula One race car in college. I loved designing the fiberglass shell for our race car. Here's part of a flywheel for my design machine elements class that I designed. Here's another more detailed version of it with a magnetic levitation and part of a continuously variable system. These discs, part of a continuous variable system that I'm developing to this day. Here's a part of a leash that I was designing and prototyping 3D printed parts. I actually have, my name is on a patent for this. Here I am at that sensor company in that small town I was talking about. Over here's that little computer I spent tons and tons of time with, and I loved doing this. This is part of that creating and iterating. I spent many years here, and I put in many 60 hours weeks, and I loved every minute of it. But I was also up in the mountains of Colorado with all the seasons and all the fun, and it was all happening around me, and I was in this windowless room. And so there was a part of me that always wanted to get outside of this room at the same time. And it's hard. Sometimes you got to make choices and you got to pick and choose. I tried to do both. So I tried to stick some playing into that learning and creative. You may have heard, or I showed you from before, my cardboard classic. Every year at the mountain, at the end of the season, we'd make a race. And the best cardboard racer would be not only designed great, but also run fast. And there were a lot of competitors. This was the first year that I did it. We did the land speeder. That's me right there and 6 of my friends. And we won the thing first time around. That usually never happens in engineering. And it was awesome. And it led me on a path to want to do it 5 more times. I never even came close, but I still kept trying. And so part of this whole idea is this is the 5th time around I did a steamboat. It started out with just a sketch, just playing around with it in my free time. This is on a whiteboard at work. Then I convinced my boss to take the whole 2nd level of the company so I could start building this massive, I don't even know how I got it off the 2nd level, to tell you the truth. There's the 2nd part of it. Eventually I got it down to the floor, in which I convinced him that I could then take over the bottom part of the garage. I built up till we got it painted. And then there we are, the whole company dressed up as pirates. It was a blast. It took a ton of time, a ton of money. And my sense of joy that came out of that was immense. To this day, I love just looking at these pictures, even though the thing did not move. But all the way up to the top of the racetrack, people loved it. And so I got my little claim to fame anyway. All right, playing. Playing is also part of me from the very beginning. I'm gonna whip through some quick ones. From my high school picture, I jumped out of a plane so we could put it in my yearbook. In college, I rode on the crew team. That was rolling forward. And in Kona, I paddled, which is facing forward instead of backwards. Freestyle sled jumping, definitely did it, love it. Snowboarding, of course, many years. Hockey, man, I sucked on skates, but I devoured it up. I played for several years and I miss it. I actually played with a couple of guys down on the roller hockey rink, which is entirely different, but still just as much fun. Whitewater rafting, check. Whoops, what'd I do? Oh, there we go. Whitewater, there you go. Kayaking, heck yes. Although I don't have my gear for it anymore, I love doing it. Disc golf, sure. Volleyball, look at that airtime. I was on a volleyball team for 2 years, loved it. A little bit of hacky sack for sure. Skimboarding, definitely. Skimboarding on your head, sure. Sailing, I get to only do it once a year when we go to the lake house in the summer, but I freaking love it. I'll spend all day out there. Tennis, every day if I can. Hiking, I've done the Grand Canyon 6 times, once all the way rim to rim, and I've done it every time with my mom, and that's my best friend from junior high who went with me on one trip. It was awesome. And this is me last week, baby, up for the first time. That may look easy, but good Lord, it is not easy. And one wrong move and you go a lot faster than that. And a couple of times I scared the bejesus out of myself. But I even cut my foot open and I kept going for 3 hours because I could not stop having fun. All right, so photography. Where does that come from? I was born about the time that right around junior high was when disposable cameras came out. And for about 15 years, I never left the house without a disposable camera in my pocket, starting from 7th grade. I've got pictures, I don't have time to run through them all going, but throughout my life, I ended up being the photographer for both acting and directing in my shots. There's one from Christmas this year. And even years ago, these are some shots from 7 or 8 years ago, before I even thought about doing photography as a regular thing. But every one of these, I probably took 20 or 30 shots of the same one, just trying to get the right detail. And not a lot of these photos didn't even turn out. For every one that I love, there's thousands that I chucked. But clearly, I don't mind failing at it, and there's a passion in it. And so this one, I waited outside to get that lightning strike for hours, and I love it. It was worth it. So there's something about photography that I've always loved. I just never thought about it as something that would make me happy, because it can't make you money, but it always gave me joy. So one of my brothers is a commercial builder. The other one's a real estate broker. And about 7 or 8 years ago, one of them asked me about virtual tours. And so virtual tours, it triggered my interest. It's got technology, it's got pictures. Maybe I can do something about it. So I started engineering a tripod that would hold the camera right. This is the early days. There's not a one-shot thing where you could just buy the software and the hardware and make it happen. You kind of had to work it out. This is my 3D printing and circuit design lab that I had in my living room as I tried to figure out how I could make all the parts to make the tripod. This is the second ever 3D printer for consumers that came out like 7 or 8 years ago. This was only their second model. It's still made out of wood. This is how far back. There are hundreds of different 3D printers now, all super fancy, different types, but I jumped on as soon as it came out, and I love this thing. Here's the first gear that I printed to make the camera automatically rotate. I didn't need to do this. I learned out later that this was a lot of over design, but I still had a ton of fun doing it, and it mixed the two things of photography and engineering together. Here's my 3D printed housing. Probably had to print 15 of these before I got one that finally printed all the way out. The gears worked amazingly. The knobs worked flawlessly. Oddly, this is one of the only pictures I have of the camera, because I was always taking pictures from the camera. Never had a second camera to take it, but that's kind of what it looked like. Here is my happy place, or my joyful place, depending on how you look at it. This was one of my labs way back in Tallahassee. All right, so for those of you who haven't seen this before, just a super fast run through. Taking the pictures, you're doing it in a spherical image, and then you have to stitch a bunch of these together. So it's not just taking pictures. There's a lot of other things that had to go into it. Once you stitch those pictures together, you get something like this. It might be familiar to some of you in here. This is called the equirectangular picture. It stitches all the pictures. This is how you save it. It's very similar to what you think of as a globe, turning a sphere into a flat object that we can recognize and utilize. And to make just this part happen, I had to use software that was very complicated, and I learned it inside and out, and I realized I could repeat the process. So I wrote another program to run the program to make it go fast, so that I could do one picture in 30 seconds, so I could stitch them together and start to create virtual tours somewhat efficiently, because I didn't want to just do this for fun. I wanted to do it for money. And so this part came out great, and I still use this to this day. That's not the end of it, though, because once you get all the pictures together, you still have to assemble them. For a while, I was using the program called Lightroom. I would use all the geographical data and the altitude data and mix it together, and wrote another program that would figure out how to stitch the pictures together. I still had to whiteboard out the tour, how I wanted it to go. It was a drawn out process, and it was difficult to make it all seem profitable. On top of that, I had to mix up browsers, Internet Explorer, Safari, Chrome, there's Java, Adobe Flash, HTML5, then there's desktops and laptops and tablets and phones. And all of this stuff is not the fun part, but it was necessary to make the whole virtual tool thing work. And in the end, this is about the kind of standard tour that I could get coming out. It was a little smoother than this. This is kind of a desktop recording. But as you can see, I want you to just notice that the transition. So there'd be a little hotspot here. You look around and you click on it. And that's pretty much how virtual tours were for quite a few years, until, dun, 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 Matterport came out. Now, if you've never seen Matterport before, a new type of camera where it creates the dollhouse. That's what this overhead 3D view is, and it changed the game. It is super impressive. It looks amazing, and it happens because they created a camera that not only takes pictures, but also scans with an infrared laser to create depth. And that is how they got past all of that stuff I just went over, so that it could make it a lot easier for a photographer to make a virtual tour and make it profitable. However, the camera's several $1,000s. You have to upload it to a platform. There's lots of hidden costs. And on top of it, I would have to trash everything that I just spent all this time developing. So for a while, no, one more thing. Also, Matterport created these it's called a parallax transition. And compared to what I just showed you with mine, this is much more smoother. It's revolutionary. It really makes the realism come out. And there's just no other way to do it with Matterport. And so this is kind of what it looks like. This is a Matterport camera. Clearly it's bulkier. They must have put a ton of design to it, just like that. This is a standard tripod that I would create. These both cost about the same. The difference is this camera, I can take a lot better pictures and I can edit them. However, I cannot efficiently create the tour. And so for a while, I thought, you know what, maybe it's just C120 photography and I'll do the standard wide angle shots and I can still be profitable that way. It's all about pivoting. Until 4 months ago, when out of several companies, I follow them. Oh, that one works okay. That one works okay. It's still not going to change what Matterport does. But MetaReal came out. Look familiar? It is a dollhouse. Not only is it a dollhouse view, but it is clean. It's crisp. The walls are straight. This isn't a scanned image. It's using a new process in which there is some editing to do, but it's not the way that I was doing it. It's a little bit more efficient. On top of that, it creates these overhead floor plans automatically. You can jump in. And a key component, the transitions are just like the Matterport. And I thought, yay, this is great. But it's still in beta. And there might still be an editing process. I don't know if I can still make it profitable. I'll certainly do it for fun, but am I going to be able to use this as a replacement? And to my delight, this button appeared on the site, build it for me. So now what this means is I can take the pictures, I can edit the pictures, I can create the part that I love to do, and I can outsource the building. And it's cheap. It's like $2 to $4 a pano, no problem. 50 to 80 bucks for a tour, and I can outsource that. I don't have to do any of that, and I can spend that extra time taking more virtual tours. So this is thrilling. Just to go over a quick one-to-one fight, because these are things I'd love to have some feedback on. This is kind of where they're at. MetaReal is a beta project, but it's developing fast. Here's the differences: cheap versus expensive. Matterport camera is expensive. The process is expensive. To just put 5 tours up, I got to pay 60 bucks a month, and I can only put 5 up. If I want to go to 7, I have to spend a whole lot more money and or pull down other tours. Essentially, this is built for real estate, the idea that a house is only going to be up for a few weeks or a few months and then you're going to take it down. But for me, I want to be able to do vacation rentals. I want to be able to do businesses that are online. I want them to be able to keep the tours up for years and years. So I need something that's more cost effective. And MetaReal does it by a storage space. So for $9 a month, I can have 5 gigabytes of space. That's 10s, 20s, 30s, 10s, 20s, dozens of tours for the same amount. So that's huge. MetaReal has downloadable floor plans automatically. Now, this is something that can be done as an add-on with Matterport, but it's just not automatic. And so this is kind of what automatically happens when you do it through the MetaReal process. Fantastic. Just one more thing, I can market for free. Doesn't cost me any extra effort. I can use any camera with Matterport. Only Matterport compatible cameras or that big fancy one. So I'm back to being able to use my own camera, which is key. I can edit the photos myself. It's what I love to do. It's the part that gives, I can put that extra touches on it. With Matterport, you're automatically uploading it. It's part of their whole system to make it efficient, but it is missing a key aspect of being able to control the process and the data. I can use any device to upload, whereas Matterport, you have to have an iPhone or iPad and use their app. It's very limiting. I have the option to outsource, whereas if I'm not using that super fancy camera, but I am using a Matterport compatible camera, I still have to spend time building it on the Matterport system. There's no automatic 3D layout, so Matterport does still have that automatic part of it, but it doesn't look as clean. There's less photos needed, so I can go into a bathroom and just take one shot. That's a key component if I'm doing a huge house. To have to go in and take 2 shots, even in small rooms, just costs more time, which costs more money. Custom nadir. A nadir is that spot on the floor. So this is in Metareel, that looks nice and clean. And for some reason in Matterport, they blur it out and there's no way to get rid of that. It's just a weird thing, but it's one extra bonus to having a Metareel. There's no fly through in Metareel. This is a fly through on Matterport. It is pretty amazing, I have to admit. To make still images actually look like you're flying through is pretty impressive, but it's something I'm willing to give up to get all that other extra time and money savings. The hotspot. So the Matterport does have a better hotspot, which gives you kind of a more stylish heads up for information. This is Metareels, it's pretty basic, but they're in beta, so that could change, it could get better. And Street View. Metareel lets me upload Street View automatically. I was paying 25 bucks a month to do Street View uploads, and I can cancel that service and free. Matterport and Response has temporarily made it free, but who knows for how long. And mainly the thing right now is that Matterport has reputation. They've established themselves as the Coca-Cola of virtual tours. So people almost call it a Matterport when you're talking about a virtual tour. So there's no reputation yet for Metareel, but that's something that could change over time. And so the one last thing I had was, my issue was, can I do outside? Because these tours are almost always exclusively inside, and Metareel is working currently on being able to make that work. And so here is an outside patio. Awesome. That may be all I really need to be able to integrate, especially out here in Hawaii. Having an outdoor aspect to the tours is key, and it's a seamless integration. It looks a little strange in the dollhouse view, but I'm perfectly willing to accept it, and it's part of an evolution. And so hopefully in 2021, this will solve all my problems that I've had with making this an efficient process. And so that is my presentation. I was probably a lot more than 10 minutes, but hopefully the roller coaster was worth watching, and thank you very much. If you have any questions, throw them at me. Also, if you have any feedback about all this comparisons, please feel free to one-to-one with me, because I would love to get some feedback on it. And okay.